Hi guys, how are you all? This is FJ What If? Today we are going to discuss about what if Naruto was Madara's student part 11. Before start the episode, please like and subscribe my channel. Chapter 11 Ash Amongst the Sand. The halls were bland white in color and the room reeked with the smell of medicine. The glaring lights from above them shone, brightly blinding anyone that looked into them. There were no windows for the light to escape out of. Just the white room with a single bed, which also doubled as an operating table for experiments and procedures. The covers of the bed were white and soft, perfect for anyone to sleep on. The pillow was new and perfectly fluffy, allowing for easy elevation and sweet dreams. One would expect the room to be void room, except for a blue-haired woman was sitting on the bed. She was wearing a revealing navy blue robe with a large hemline that exposed her arms, back and lateral part of her C-cup breasts, along with her belly which had piercings around her navel, and navy blue pants, which also doubled as her shoes. She had fingerless white Tekko shinobi hand covers, which went to her biceps and covered most of her arms, and also she had beautiful scaled blue flower hay clips pinned into her left bang with a small bun, and a blue origami flower which was pinned into her bun. She had arrived at the base that her host and partner dubbed the mountain's graveyard, for it had skeletons of large creatures dotting the perimeter of the base. She was a little anxious, if she was honest to herself. She was going to undergo a procedure using cells and blood of a near-extinct, but powerful clan, the Uzumaki. She knew very little about the clan other than red hair was particularly common. She heard about the rest from her host, who was more than gracious to answer any of her questions. He claimed that this procedure was harmless and the effects of such a procedure would be too great to decline. Her body was going to become stronger than it ever was, and her chakra, which was already strong and large, would have a serious kick in power. Not only that, but her lifespan would also increase dramatically, although it won't be as great as other Uzumaki who were born with it, but considering how far she was into her life, she would probably live as long as any other. She heard the sound of the only door in the room opening, revealing her host/partner, Ryu Yoke's, who had also discarded his Akatsuki cloak and opted to wear his completely black one. He was carrying what appeared to be a folded hospital gown in his left hand. "This is for you, so please strip down for me," spoke Naruto neutrally. After the incident with the wolf that happened earlier in the week, Conan understood that some things that Naruto said were not what he actually meant. Conan gave him a glare which he successfully understood, as given his recent encounters there were such things that men were not allowed to see. So he turned around and held out his left hand with the hospital gown, waiting for the woman to take it away from him. He heard the sound of clothes falling off a body, and he felt the hospital gown being taken away from him. He knew that if he looked back at her he would possibly die an agonizing death. Also, he would probably blush from seeing a woman, such as Conan, naked in front of him. Lust was an instinct, not an emotion, so feeling such things as sexual hints and among others were of course in reach to the blonde. The Abanana Basaka Henkin, bestial berserker transformation, was a testament to that, as in that mode Naruto purely relied on his instincts as a beast to fight. To him the urge to reproduce oneself in another was encoded into each individual. Those urges and instincts were difficult to control, and controlling them was among the hardest things to do in the world, since it was instinct for fish to swim, and birds to fly. Since they were programmed to do such things, it was their instinct. When he thought about it, humans were among the most cruel of beasts, and they hadn't really evolved to be anything other than cruel, but he knew that humans could still love in a world of hate, like that old man who gifted him the Shiromakaran no Tsurugi. Madara had told him that love and hate were instinct. It was an instinct to love something and someone, and to hate in the same capacity. Naruto had yet to find love outside of his fatherly love for Madara. Although he hated everything and everyone in the Hidden Leaf village, and he knew that he could never achieve his vengeance no matter how hard he tried, his vengeance was forever out of his reach. What was his vengeance exactly? He knew all too well. He heard Conan signaling him that she could be viewed again. She was currently folding her previous clothes away. "I'll have my Zetsus attend to your needs and wants. I advise you drink fluid shortly before the procedure," spoke Naruto as he left to prepare the final stages of the procedure. However, he looked behind him to see Conan looking down at the floor uneasily. He stopped in his stride and looked back at her. He formed a familiar hand seal and created Shadow Clone, who promptly left the room to prepare. He took a chair from one of the corners of the room and sat it down near Conan's bed. The blue-haired woman looked up at him curiously. "You looked uneasy. Zetsus don't make great company and they're loud, annoying and obnoxious. Even I don't like Zetsus, but they have their uses, so instead I'll be your company," answered Naruto to the unspoken question. instead of rebuking him for what Conan would view as a sign of comfort, which normally Conan would shout out against as it made her feel weak, and she hated feeling weak and useless. But since any sign of comfort was one of the many strange things that Ryuyoke's would not do, she instead let him do what he want. Instead, she took it in stride as she could see that Naruto cared about her, although she was unaware in what capacity. So instead she smiled a small, soft smile which was something alien to her and out of character. When she first met Ryu, he was a cold, uncaring bastard that wouldn't show emotion to any scenario. He was cruel and efficient in his duties and assignments. He viewed people around him as puppets to be toyed with and bottles on a shelf or dirt under his boot. He was manipulative and calm, a deadly combination, and he toyed with his comrades and prey as if they were sport. But recently she had been noting a change in his behavior and demeanor. While he was a lot less cruel, he no longer toyed with his opponents unless they were strong, and if they were strong, he would like to test their abilities, which to Conan, who believed that, when he did that, it was a compliment as they proved their worth to him. He also talked more and was more open about his thoughts. He was also more cooperative and listened to her on occasion. However, she had yet to see him truly smile other than a sickly smirk which was twisted and demented. And he somehow valued friendship, although he believed that friendship was a long process and equal trust and understanding were needed. She knew that whenever Ryu blushed, it means his sexual desire was spiked, which was a consequence of instinct. It was instinct to seek sex, and like it was an instinct to walk and talk. Thinking nothing more of her partner, she reined in her thoughts and waited for the medical procedure to be done. At least she was at ease with Ryu with her. Naruto's shadow clone meanwhile had various beakers and vials in front of him at a small desk. He was coalescing and combining and swirling blood in a small vial, which was combining into a single blood very nicely. He had his Zetsus travel to the land of water and access the damaged hospital, which was still standing. The Zetsus gathered up blood samples from various members of his clan. Although some of the blood was old and diluted, some still survived, and he was able to revitalize them with his own life force. He knew that Conan after the procedure would need physical therapy, so to become adjusted to her new body, unlike him with his healing factor and natural heritage, it would be harder for Conan. So he was going to do exercise spars with her to reach her bodily goal. He would also teach her kenjutsu, which would also factor into the physical therapy. And sealing if she was interested. Naruto funneled all the collected blood from the Uzumaki clan into a blood bag. It was time to begin the operation. Naruto's shadow clone returned to the single room with an IV and a blood bag. The real Naruto supported Conan as she eased herself in a resting position. Clone Naruto traced Kanam's left arm and vein and tapped his finger to encourage dilation of her blood. And then the clone inserted the IV into Kanan's arm and then allowed the blood to drip down the nozzle into her vein. Conan watched the blood flow into her. It was now too late for second thoughts to change her mind. She did feel a little anxiety at seeing the red liquid. She tightened her fist, but she stopped when she felt the original Naruto's hand over hers, and with a look that was the most real Conan had seen. His red eyes weren't half-lidded like they usually were, but instead seemed to have life in them. At least that's what she thought. She tried to quell her anxiety and just get it done and over with. Naruto tried to comfort her to the best of his ability, but comforting someone was not something he was good at, but he tried anyway. A couple of hours later, Conan was sleeping in the same bed, with Naruto watching over her like an unmoving statue. It was a day later that Conan was walking around on her feet, and instantly, she could feel different. It like her body had removed a great weight from her core. And like Ryu said, her chakra levels skyrocketed and became stronger and more resilient. Health and healing also improved, where she could recover from major wounds within a few days and lesser ones with a few hours. So now Conan and Ryu were standing before each other, ready to start physical therapy. They didn't need to say any words other than through their fists. It was a spar, so no one would get hurt much. When Conan aimed a punch at Naruto's head, he swatted it away with his palm and tried to elbow her on the collarbone, but he stopped and said again, and their sparring started over again. With his Sharingan eyes, Naruto could read and predict all of Conan's moves. And she was really adept at taijutsu, where she was able to keep up with him and his attacks. As their spars went by, the fighting became more intense, and Conan was able to keep up with him after hours of non-stop sparring, and she wasn't panting or out of breath. "I think that's enough," stated Naruto as he abruptly ended the sparring matches. "I remember expressing interest in the subject of kenjutsu, correct?" Conan nodded at the blonde, signaling he was right. Naruto unsealed two bakken, wood swords, and threw one to Conan, who grasped it firmly in her hand. "You're giving me a stick?" questioned Conan as she looked back down at the wooden sword. My father told me that a master with a wooden stick shall always defeat a novice with a steel sword, replied Naruto, as he fell into a traditional kenjutsu stance. Conan did the same thing until Naruto told her that the spacing between her feet were off. They sparred for an hour, leaving Conan with many bruises over her body, and she was rather sore. That's why he wanted wooden swords, or she'll be dead. Sloppy, commented Naruto. Conan couldn't yell at him since what he said was true. The spacing between your feet is always off, making you easy to topple over, like a domino where your opponent would kill you. Your eyes just track my sword, when you should be watching my body. You swing your sword around like it truly is a stick, and you don't think of your weapon as an extension of your body. If this was serious, you'd be dead, harangued Naruto. He knew Conan was going to be poor at kenjutsu, but he didn't expect as much. He stabbed the wooden sword into the ground, where it stayed there. However, being a teacher to you, I'll assist you as much as possible. First, I will teach you the proper stance where you can adapt it to fit your own style. He walked behind her and gently placed his hands against hers. Conan's back met Rhea's firm chest, and she noted the close proximity the two had. She blushed but quickly hid it, and with his guiding hands was she able to learn the proper stance. Now they stood opposite each other in the same field. My father explained kenjutsu to me like this. A kenjutsu wielder is always like the 5 natures, each person representing a different nature, explained Naruto. My father called me wind and lightning, ferocity and swiftness, leaving my opponents no time to attack because of my aggressive and fast attacks. We will spar again, and if I see a mistake, I will discipline you, spoke Naruto, who picked up his sword again. He was using a similar method to how Madara trained him in kenjutsu, only he would merely tap Conan on her body instead of hitting her over the head with a cane. The kenjutsu sparring commenced again, with Conan being outclassed by her more experienced tutor. Later during the week, Naruto would teach Conan the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu to help increase and speed up her training. It worked because of Conan's revamped chakra level. She was able to maintain and balance a large amount of clones, nowhere near that of Naruto's, but good enough. So each day Ryu and Conan's clones would practice kenjutsu while the real ones were working on Conan's fuinjutsu. Although unlike kenjutsu, Conan didn't suck at fuinjutsu. Although there were times when Naruto had to assist her by showing her the correct strokes by placing his hands on top of hers again. And throughout the week Conan was flourishing under Rhea's tutelage. She was able to hold her clones, were able to hold their own against Rhea's clones, although when she dispelled her clones she was left with a skull-splitting headache that Naruto would cure with his medical ninjutsu. Naruto was also able to see Conan's own self-developed kenjutsu style, and he had to say it was impressive. It combined Conan's slender frame and speed together, giving her an advantage, and because of her inexperience, she was unpredictable, and unpredictability was useful in the shinobi world. He was noted to be highly unpredictable himself. Conan's style was closely linked to water. Her movements were fluent and fast like wind. Her stance was unique, unlike Naruto's, whose stance was crouched, anticipating when his opponent would attack. He would have his legs evenly spaced, and either his sword pointing towards his enemy, either by his side or near his temple, so to react to shuriken and kunai at any time. Conan had her feet together, allowing her to move in short distances and in quick succession, and she could levitate with her papers, possibly nullifying any weakness. And she held out her sword pointing down to the ground, and she preferred a one-handed style compared to Naruto, who would use both or one of his hands for the tanbagari. And her posture looked rather stiff, but this was a ruse since, because of her frame, she was rather slender and could avoid attacks or transform into her paper form. Her skill in sealing, while nowhere near that of Mito Uzumaki or Naruto's, was rather impressive, as she was able to replicate Naruto's wrist seals. However, she required an article of clothing rather than having it on their skin. So she imbued more seals on her birthday teko. Maybe she got her skill from being around Nagato, who was also an Uzumaki. So now Conan and Naruto were standing opposite each other in the same field. Naruto unsealed the Tanbagari no Tsurugi, dragonfly cutting sword, and Conan unsealed the Shirome Karen, white lotus bud sword. Naruto had to be careful. The Tanbagari could cut through nearly anything, with an exception being the Shirome Karen. Conan was informed of the Shirome Karen's abilities and making anything it touches as brittle as snow, including skin and bone. The two fell into each other's respective stances, where they both rushed at each other. Their swords met in a clash of metal and sparks. Naruto's ferocious style versus Conan's flowing style. Naruto swept his feet in an attempt to topple Conan, only for her to jump in the air. Using his momentum he had built, he tried to stab Conan, who blocked it with the flat side of the Shirome Karen. The two jumped away from each other and flee at each other again. Konan attempted a sword strike at Ryu's left, Naruto predicting her next move with the Sharingan, prepared to block it, but instead, he saw her empty hand pass by him. Quickly maneuvering out of the way to intercept her feint, quickly did he almost suffer a horrific gash on his side. Konan gritted her teeth at the man he saw him break her defense with by grappling her hilt with the tip of his blade and toppled her over onto the ground. Following after her, he attempted to stab her and she rolled away, where she tried a vertical gash. But it failed as he stepped back a bit, with only missing the Shiromakaran by a hair's breadth, where if he didn't move, half of his face would have been cloven in two. He unsealed 3 shuriken and threw them at Konan, who deflected them with her own sword. After deflecting the shuriken, Konan found that her opponent teacher had disappeared. Using the flat reflective side of the Shiromakaran, did Konan see Naruto running behind her, ready to stab her in the back. She pivoted her body to avoid the stab, and she cocked her arm and slashed Naruto diagonally, across the chest and at his shoulder, where his blood splattered and pooled across the ground. Konan grinned a little before her grin disappeared when Naruto exploded into a plume of smoke, signaling that she was fighting a shadow clone. She heard clapping behind her to see Naruto staring at her neutrally. "Well, if you defeated my shadow clone, it certainly means that you're already at expert level of Kenjutsu. We made amazing time with the Cage Bunshin no Jutsu. It helpfully reduced the time needed to train you," said Naruto in a complimenting fashion. Konan sealed the Shiromakaran into her right tekko, and both left for the mountain's graveyard, to gather supplies, so they could prepare for their next mission. Konan was getting ready to leave for her next mission. She was wearing her Akatsuki cloak and fixing her new hair clips, until there was a knock on the door in the room she was currently occupying. She ushered the person in and wasn't surprised to see Ryu waiting for her in his Akatsuki garb. "I wish to speak to you about Obito," said Ryu, starting the conversation. Konan had been expecting this. Ability-wise, she knew nearly everything about the Uchiha Pretender. His Dojutsu, the Sharingan, is powerful. I believe he has the Mangekyo Sharingan, replied Konan cooperatively. "From what I know, he is well versed in fire release, but the greatest thing you need to worry about is his near-invincible technique. I don't know what it's called, but I know it's a space-time ninjutsu on a massive scale, maybe even surpassing that of the Hiraishin. With it, he is able to send parts of his body to a dimensional plane while he leaves an afterimage of himself behind. When he sends his body into the plane, he becomes intangible. Any and all attacks will simply phase through him, and can phase through objects like a ghost. However, he can only maintain his intangibility for 5 minutes, and he can reset the time limit when he phases back into existence. So continuous attacks will be key to his defeat, and if you can touch and hold him, even if he becomes intangible, you too will become intangible with him, so therefore you can attack him. He will also try to suck you into his dimension. That's the only time once he's solid and can be attacked," explained Konan in detail, with Naruto taking all of it in. He knew that the Kumonju no Yuki, 9 masked beasts of valor, would be invaluable to the fight, and his other Kamiyonaneo technique. "Thank you, that information will be helpful," spoke Naruto neutrally. Before Naruto could leave, Zetsu appeared and opened up his Venus flytrap extension, revealing his multicolored self. "Leader Sama has requested the both of you," spoke Zetsu. Konan and Naruto performed the ram seal and closed their eyes. Their minds were transported, leaving behind their bodies. They awoke to find themselves in a dark cave with stalactites and stalagmites, with a small lantern in the middle with a flame flickering about. They were the only ones in the room aside from Nagato acting through Yahako's body. "Ryu. Konan. I'm pleased that you're here. I have a mission that is best suited to your unique talents and abilities. But first, Zetsu has informed me of the success to your many assignments in the Land of Water. I applaud you for your duties and the funds the Akatsuki have generated from the Mizukage, and she sends her gratitude, especially to you, Ryu," spoke Pain neutrally, and with his words a cold shiver ran up Ryu's spine, although he made no facial feature. "The Akatsuki have been recently contacted by a politician from the Land of Wind. He demanded that the organization send among their best agents for this assignment. And I can't send Haiden and Kakazu, since they would only draw attention to themselves and the organization. Deidara and Sasori are not suited for this, given Sasori's past with the Land of Wind, and Itachi and Kisame are currently preoccupied with another mission. Since this politician asked for the best, I will send the best. You two will journey to the Land of Wind and complete the mission. I have immeasurable faith in your abilities, so please keep up the standard." Nagato was about to leave before something came to him that nearly made him forget about something. "Oh, and Ryu, check page 23. And Nagato's astral body left, and Naruto's and Kanen's followed shortly after. Back in their own bodies, Naruto peered out of the corner of his eye and saw Zetsu holding a bingo book. He took the book from Zetsu's hand and flipped to page 3. Naruto glared at the page as if hoping for it to burst on fire at any moment. Konan peeked over his shoulder and the tips of her toes, so to get a look, Ryu had a lot of bounties, even more so than Kakazu. On the page read in big black letters: Ryu Yokeis, wanted for the fornication, copulation and coitus of the Godei Mizukage, Mei Terumi. She didn't want to read the price on his head because there were so many zeros. Now Ryu Yokeis was an international criminal wanted officially in 4 countries. That woman, cursed Naruto as he sent chakra into his right eye and used Amaterasu on the bingo book, reducing it to ash in seconds. He dropped the burning book and left the base. With a grinning Zetsu melding into the ground and a slightly smirking Konan who found it funny that such a crime was possible, following after him. At the entrance to the mountain's graveyard, Naruto was waiting for his partner to get her things ready. He was pleased with her progress in sealing, considering it was a difficult form of shinobi arts, although he had faith in her and Naruto expressing faith was a rare thing indeed. However, at the moment, he was having questioning beliefs. He remembered what the kind old man told him. At first he refused to believe that random acts of kindness and keep such things as powerful as hatred at bay. But maybe the old man was right. Maybe there was hope in the world, and sometimes, the simplest things in the world are the hardest to understand and grasp. Sometimes you are looking for a simple object which you had lost only to find it right under your nose. To Naruto, kindness and other positive things were unreal to him. He didn't know what to think of kindness and generosity. Maybe he was incapable of both. No, if he wasn't capable of kindness, he wouldn't have gotten Konan those hair clips. Was it human nature to be kind to others as they are kind to you? Was it an instinct? Why do people do the things they do in the name of love and not hate? Those were the questions floating within Naruto's mind like balloons ready to pop. He had also noted a change in his overall remaining personality. He was less aggressive and more neutral. He also apologized for the simplest of things. He wondered why he chose to live in such a world, as cruel as this one. He also felt, just feeling something was unreal to him and almost foreign to him. He couldn't explain it. Did he actually have what made a person, qualities he thought he lost? Although the feeling was small, he couldn't deny it wasn't there. The feeling was warm, not cold like winter or hot like summer. If he were to describe it, the feeling was more like spring, budding like a flower in the light of the sun. He knew that what he was feeling was brought about by an external object or being. But the feeling, it was small, but warm, tiny like a butterfly yet so full of life. He felt it when he gave Konan her birthday presents. That smile of hers sparked something within him. It was minuscule, but it existed nonetheless. He didn't know what the feeling was. Emotions were unreal to him, and the only time he did show emotion was when he was trying to convey what he wanted to feel by replicating that certain emotion, like anger. Although he didn't know how good he was at it. But the feeling, it made him taste life again. If others were to describe him, the word would be empty. Both figurative and literal. He literally was an empty vessel. He was born to be a Jinchuriki and now, he's no longer a jailer. The prison which held the beast was empty. And all the qualities of his mask were gone. But the only time he felt anything was for Madara. He could still love and hate as they were instincts, just as walking and talking. Madara was the father he longed for and wanted, no matter how sick it may have sounded. The man looked at him, was bothered when Naruto was bothered, was upset when Naruto was upset, angry when Naruto was angry. Was that what a father was supposed to be? Above all in his life, even more than his now forgotten dream of becoming and being the Hokage, was Naruto having a family of his own, since he didn't have one growing up. Still, the concept for having children, other than just survival of a species, was still something Naruto did not understand. They were loud, bratty, trouble-making little monsters. In Kirigakure he saw siblings fight each other, as if they were mortal enemies, and if their parents asked them to not do something, they did it anyway, no matter how many times they were asked not to do it. No, he was just being hypocritical. All people have their faults, which make you want to yell at them. Children are no exception. But still, to feel was something new to the blonde. Not only that, he would have to obscure his face some more, since the land of Wind people were smarter than most other nations. Their cunning minds and their intelligence are something to be wary of. He could hear footsteps approaching from behind. He didn't have to turn his head as he sensed Konan's chakra coming from behind him. When it came to sensory, Naruto was better than Madara. Unlike Madara, who didn't decide to strengthen his rare gift, couldn't tell apart chakra signatures very well, but because of all his encounters with Hashirama Senju, he could sense the signature of his rival's chakra anywhere. Naruto could feel that Konan had a uniqueness when it came to her chakra. Of course, it now had the charismatic feel of Uzumaki chakra, but hers was soft like flower petals and warm like the morning sun. Madara had told him that each person's chakra had a different sensation to it, and very few words could be used to describe it. "Shall we head off?" spoke Konan, who didn't have her neutral blank look. Naruto nodded at her and summoned the Suzaku, vermilion bird, by using the Kamiona-neo. Naruto jumped onto the back of the Suzaku, which made Konan raise her eyebrow. "Doesn't he turn into a cloud of bats to travel?" "Get on," commanded Naruto from his sitting position on the bird. Konan was a little unsure of what was happening, and her unsurety only grew when the giant red bird looked at her with coal-black eyes. "No thank you," dismissed Konan politely and closed her eyes, trying to not look at the bird. Naruto instead got off the bird and hefted Konan bridal style, which earned a shout from the blue-haired woman. He planted the woman firmly on the bird and her back met his firm chest. With a mental command from its master, the Suzaku rocketed from its position and flew into the open sky. Konan had flown in the sky before, but not at this speed or height. The rush of air hitting her face felt like bricks being thrown at her again and again. Both of her hands were tightly clinging onto the feathers of the bird like a desperate child hoping to not fall off. Further and further the bird flew into the air, higher and higher. Konan closed her eyes in fear at the sheer speed at which the bird was flying. She didn't look back at the man behind her because she was too busy being concerned for herself. Her usually kempt hair was flailing like a mad person, and some strands were whipping against her face. She could feel her doom approaching her. Sometimes she felt that the man behind had a few loose screws. Faster and faster, swifter than the wind, the Suzaku flew through the air, piercing the atmosphere. She could feel it coming, her end. But for just a moment, nothing came but this content feeling. She opened her eyes to see the Suzaku flying at an even pace above the clouds. She knew that it was the early morning, but the sun shining over the clouds cloaked the white shapeless forms, giving them new colors of red, coalesced, and gold. It was spectacular, true beauty before her eyes. For a moment, she envied Kumagakure, waking up to such a display. She looked up at the sun and was enthralled with it. She could feel its warm rays against her and through her clothing, bathing her in light, purifying every part of her body stricken with cold. What she thought she was seeing was art in its truest form, the natural beauty and wonder of the world. No word could describe what she was feeling at the moment. The sun and the golden red clouds made her feel content, as if nothing in the world could ruin this moment. She looked back over her shoulder to see Ryu gazing into the sun, and for a moment, she swore she saw a flash of ocean blue cross his eyes. Blue, the color that reflected the sky. But as quickly as it disappeared, it was replaced with Naruto's eternal Menkyo Sharingan in his right eye, and his left eye remained as the normal Sharingan. The sun beamed off his golden hair, making it appear to have all the shades of yellow, yellow like sunflowers, ironic given where they were now. To her, yellow was truly a special color. Yellow could convey so many emotions, and all of them positive. A picture could tell 1,000 words, though a color could give you few words, but all meaningful. His skin, the light pounded against it, making it glisten like diamonds and other jewels. It was also soft like feathers, but yet firm when it needed it to be. You could explore every inch of someone and yet only find half of what you're looking for. She eased herself more into his chest and found that he didn't retaliate or move, too focused on the light in front of him. "Sorry if this is late, but I knew you wanted to do something special for your birthday. This is the best I can give you. Happy birthday," whispered Naruto into Kanen's ear, where the man smiled a little. "Feel the euphoria radiating from her as vast and powerful as the sun. It's almost like a painting," commented Konan as her eyes kept staring into the light. "And the sky is its canvas," said Naruto, finishing her sentence. "My father told me once that everything in this world is different, from the leaves among the trees, the stones amongst the mountains, mists upon the eve, sand on the beaches, and clouds in the sky. Everything is different, even people. But yet, there was one thing, never changing, always existed in this world of ours. We see it every day and yet we think nothing of it. It's open and free like birds on the wind, not restricted by law or order. It's vaster than the ocean and yet invisible as the future." "What was he referring to?" asked Konan softly. "The sky, untouchable like a dream? Many people dream of touching it one day, and like the sky we all have one destiny, one sky," answered Naruto sagely with a small smile. Maybe the reason why you lack what makes you, you, is because you're waiting for someone to dye the canvas which is you," thought Conan. But seeing everything Ryu has done for her, whether it be intentional or unintentional, she couldn't thank him truly. He was kind, but he couldn't see it even with those eyes of his. Such kindness in the world could not be found today. Sometimes you don't need to smile to convey your hidden feelings, just through action was enough to enlighten any broken heart. "You are the most beautiful man I have ever met." She knew it was a long way to go to melt the frozen heart and blank heart of Ryu Yoke's. But she felt with every step that any hateful man can become someone worth loving. The two shinobi and the giant red bird were soaring through the clouds and air, just enjoying the moment of morning. Naruto crossed his arm across Conan's belly. "Hold on," he whispered Naruto. Conan didn't know what he meant, but she received the answer where the red bird dived for the clouds and inverted itself, so now they were flying upside down. Seeing the clouds below her, Conan stretched her arm and grazed the white puffs in the sky. It was almost soft to touch. And then the bird fully submerged itself in the white ocean in the sky. Conan could feel the air screeching by her face as she enjoyed every moment of it. She wondered briefly where they were now. But what was happening right now was calling her attention away. The clouds finally parted to reveal the land and sky. She looked down below to see many rivers cutting through the earth like knives. They were flying over the land of rivers, which bordered the land of fire and the land of wind. They even had a minuscule hidden village that wasn't high up on the food chain. Violently and suddenly the Suzaku threw Conan off its shoulders and latched its claws around her arms. The blue-haired within response gasped at the sudden action and then sent a glare to her blonde compatriot. And then the Suzaku dive-bombed towards the ground at unimaginable speeds. Closer and closer was it plummeting to the ground. Conan calmed herself as she knew nothing bad would happen. The earth was etching itself nearer and nearer. But with a sudden burst, the Suzaku opened its wings and in time before they hit the bed of a river. Softly and slowly the giant bird brought Conan's feet to the surface of the water, and allowed her to skate across it with some assistance with chakra in the soles of her feet. Conan hadn't had this much adrenaline, pumping fun in years, too many to count. She felt the Suzaku's talons leave her arms as she skated across the water herself. She ducked under a branch that would have smacked in her the face, and her presence disturbed a flock of doves who were now flying with her. She felt something hard against her back to see the fox-eared mask of the bird, pushing her along with a slightly grinning Ryu riding on its back. "Faster!" commanded Conan, and the bird's wings beat with new vigor and speed. Conan could see the end of the river, which was in fact a waterfall. She looked back to see that the bird had disappeared and the only other birds with her were the doves flying by her side. Her heart was racing with excitement. She hadn't felt so alive in before, not ever. She reached the end of the river with the gracefulness of a swan, leapt of the river with her arms spread wide, and with her eyes closed taking in everything around her. She opened her eyes and pivoted her body where Ryu and his large bird flew under her form, ready to catch her. She landed roughly on the bird, but was having too much fun to care. The bird caught in victory, at least that's what she thought it was. And she listened to the beating of its wings and the wind cried into her ears. So now they were heading to the land of wind at an even pace and speed. At the land of waves, someone was looking for someone else. This person was Sajiki Bararu, the strongest ninja in Iwagakure side form Onoki, a man known for his speed and instinctual fighting style. Sajiki was a dangerous person to all that knew him. He was a veteran of the Third Shinobi World War and even faced the Yondaime Hokage when he was a jonin back then. However, he didn't walk away from the fight without scars. He lost his right eye and had a large jagged scar that ran up his left cheek, just under his left eye. Sajiki had slicked back dark hair with several gray streaks, and a long ponytail, golden eyes and upturned eyebrows. He wore the standard Iwagakure flak jacket without the lapel with brown pants and simple brown ninja sandals. He wore a long, sleeveless purple coat with twin tails and a red tattered scarf, with its tail sprouting behind his neck. He had mesh armor, covering his entire arms, and 2 black gloves with the thumb and index fingers missing. On his brown belt were 2 holsters, holding custom-made kunai launchers. The kunai launchers had a unique appearance to them. They had a purple ring which was white on top of the handle and 3 spikes lined around the ring. The barrel of the launchers were strange as they were long, thin pyramids that was lavender in color and whitened to the tip. The handle was purple and had a thick curved arc acting as a guard. The guard was also lined by 6 thin, diamond-shaped spikes with silver edges. These were in fact seals that held countless needle-like kunai that could absorb chakra. Sajiki had one on each side of his waist. He was currently walking through a district in the land of waves. He heard that someone had spotted his target in this particular place. Of course it was difficult, as most of the people hadn't seen him and his face was never revealed. The only thing he could fall on was a photo from Konoha's bingo book, which didn't reveal much. He walked up to random people asking if they had seen this person. "Hey, lady," yelled Sajiki at a carrying groceries. The woman turned to him with curious eyes. "Have you seen this guy, name's Ryuyoke's?" spoke Sajiki as he showed the woman the photo. "No, haven't seen someone like that," replied the woman before she walked off somewhere. This was Sajiki's routine: ask a person about his objective or asking a girl on a date, get rejected, swallow sadness and later cry deeply and later eat a bagel, his favorite food. One of the quirks of the Iwa shinobi was that he got comically sad or depressed when he failed a mission, which made everyone around him also comically sad or depressed. He also liked eavesdropping on people, which on more occasions got him in trouble. He was walking down the road when he spotted a unique store. This was the last store he had to go to, which was on the street. It was a weapons store. Let's see if the old man here had seen the person. "Hey, old coot!" yelled Sajiki disrespectfully. The kind old man by the counter saw the Iwa shinobi standing at the door to the store with his hands on his hips. "How can I help you, young man?" asked the kind storekeeper. Sajiki took out the picture and showed it to the old man and asked if he had seen anyone like that. "MMHHH," hummed the man as he inspected the picture. He swore he had seen this person before, but where? "His name's Ryuyoke's, tall, blonde," stated Sajiki. Then something clicked in the old man's mind. "Why yes, there was someone like that in this store just recently," replied the man. "Really, where?" asked Sajiki hastily. "He walked into this store and I gave him a nice sword too. Don't know where he ran off to, but I think he was heading west," said the kind old man. Dejected at finding out he had to travel more, Sajiki muttered a thank you and left the store, arms drooping by his side. "The thought of finding you here, someone as ugly as you, surprises me to no end," spoke a dull monotone voice with a hint of superiority. Sajiki swiftly reached for his kunai launcher and aimed it at his right at the person, who called out to him. The person was a tall, elegant man with feminine feature, giving him a slightly androgynous appearance. His hair was shoulder length and rose pink with various ruffles through it and blue eyes. He was wearing the standard Konoha flak jacket with a pink sash around his waist, and a short-sleeved green shirt. He wore black gloves with stains of pink and a dull pink apron over his legs, which was open in the front, which reached to his feet. He had a tattoo of numerous pink flowers up the entire length of his right arm. He wore basic ninja sandals and the Konoha Haitaiate on his forehead. Togbusu. Been a long time. To what do I owe the pleasure?" spoke Sajiki as he kept his kunai launcher trained on his old Konoha rival. The two men had faced each other many times in the past and both couldn't be able to kill the other. "Just a friendly business proposition," dully spoke Toge. "As if, when you mean friendly, you actually mean piss off," smirked Sajiki, which also made Toge smirk as well. "More or less it, but it seems we have a common enemy," said Toge, pushing himself off the wall. "First of all, you can stop pointing that toy at me. I'm not here to fight." A few seconds passed of intense staring and Sajiki relented, where he placed the kunai luckner back in its position, the holster on his leg. "Well, for starters, our common enemy happens to be Ryuyoke's," said Toge. "As if, didn't take me long to figure it out," boasted Sajiki. "Yeah, sure it did," stated Toge sarcastically, which made Sajiki's eyes twitch a little. "Do you even know anything about yokeis?" spoke Toge, annoyed at his rival's sarcastic attitude, which made Sajiki scratch his head. "Out of all the hidden villages, Konoha has the most information on yokeis. Since our villages both want him eliminated, might as well share information." Toge started walking down the road with Sajiki trailing beside him. "So, got any tips?" spoke Sajiki coolly as he placed his hands behind his head. Yokeis has been described as a man trained to be the ultimate killing machine, without emotions or morals holding him back. It seems he has been trained in all forms of shinobi combat and abilities. Everything we can deduce about him is that he is someone to not take lightly, as he is opportunistic. As a predator, he will look for any sign of weakness and quickly exploit it, where he will kill you," explained Toge, with Sajiki listening. It was also quite strange seeing a Konoha and a Iwa shinobi walking side by side together. As for abilities, he has affinities towards wind, fire and lightning natures. Genjutsu master coupled with his Sharingan makes him deadly at Genjutsu. Taijutsu is supposed to be high according to reports, and he has near unmatched power in Fuinjutsu. master at Kenjutsu and quite an aggressive style, leaving no time for anyone to counterattack. Known to taunt his opponents to throw them off edge, known stealth and infiltration master can sneak into the highest security areas in the world, and according to the Bingo Book of Kumo, he can summon and control multiple beasts similar to the puppetry of Suna. So he comes from Suna, stated Sajiki. His origins is still unknown, but it doesn't matter, responded Toge. As if, yes, still he's going to be 6 feet in the ground once I'm done with him, proclaimed Sajiki. Yosuke's will not be an easy opponent, also he may have other abilities that he has yet to show. Not only that, he has a partner with him, making your job harder, reprimanded Toge in a monotone voice. Please, as if. The only people who can beat me are the Cages and the Yondaime Hokage. Yosuke's will probably be nothing compared to them, spoke Sajiki arrogantly. Don't come crawling back to me when you're a bloody mess, warned Toge. As if I would get my pretty coat covered in blood, said Sajiki as both shinobi went their own ways. After their little moment of sky falling and cloud surfing, Naruto and Konan were flying towards the land of wind on the Suzaku, known for its deserts and blistering heat which could dry up the moisture in one's body in hours. The land of wind had a harsh terrain and unforgiving weather. Many have died in the deserts from lack of water or because they took the wrong turn on the path. Rain was rare, and sandstorms were common, and if you were caught in the storms, not even your bones would found when people went looking for you. To compensate for this, the civilians of the land built cities on the oases that distinguished themselves among the sand dunes and valleys. How the people of this land were able to tolerate such an environment were beyond the thoughts of Naruto. This was his first time visiting the land of wind, and his first thought was unimpressive, followed by little creativity and prosaic. The land of wind was boring in his opinion. But he had a mission here, so he was just going to stomach it. He could see the capital within his sight. The capital of the land of wind had many spiraling towers, with creative colors and buildings, and atop those buildings were pointed domes of various bright colors. Many palm trees decorated the streets of the city, and there were flowing rivers cutting through the city and out back into the oasis. Rivers and lakes in a desert were almost unbelievable, but here it was before his eyes. Naruto, knowing that a bird like this would probably draw attention, dismissed the Suzaku and started falling towards the ground with Konan in tow. Using chakra at the bottom of their feet cushion, their fall on the sand was fine and absorbed some of the impact. They were to meet the noble at his home, where he would brief them on their mission. Walking through the streets with Konan beside him, Naruto observed the daily lives of its citizens. He was a little baffled by their dress code, which were various, dressed over other dresses with colors that ranged from gold to purple. They wore turbans to hopefully cover themselves from the scorching sun, and cloaks and furs not seen in other places outside the country. Of course, being a foreigner, Naruto had little information concerning the dress and customs of the land of wind. He looked over to Konan to see that she had stopped and was staring at their destination, the noble's house. The house 3 stories high and was adorned with all the colors of the rainbow and comforts of home. There wasn't a single speck of sand on the furnished house, and many would assume it was cleaned hourly, given hour it seemed to be sparkling like gold. It had the stereotypical look about it as accustomed to the capital architecture of the wind country. The 2 Akatsuki members, not saying anything, walked through the doors to meet with the client. As soon as their dirty boots and shoes met with the shiny floor of the mansion, servants scrabbled about like beetles, hoping to clean up the mess before their master could see it. Naruto and Konan didn't say anything other than a servant coming up to them and saying their master was expecting them. The servant showed them to a certain room in the mansion where the lord of the house was apparently waiting for them. The servant opened the door and ushered them inside, and they noted various tapestries and carpets lined the walls and floor with a multitude of colors and shades. They could smell the scent of incense that permeated the air and slightly obstructed their view. Sitting on a carpet smoking a kaizaru, Japanese smoking pipe, was a large, bulbous man with squinty eyes and a small inconspicuous nose which could barely be seen. He had a thin mustache, pointing upwards, and a small pointed goatee. He wore green robes with a cream-colored kimono underneath and a small necklace with a pearl decorating it. You have arrived?" spoke the man. He gestured for Naruto and Konan to come before him, and they did so without qualm, where they sat down before him. "Please make yourself welcome within my home. I am Gekisha, and you honor me with your presences," spoke Gekisha respectfully. "As I said, I am honored to have such high-level shinobi within my home and presence. Would you like a meal, for you must have traveled far and surely must be weary?" continued Gekisha, but was politely refused by the 2 shinobi, to which he wasn't offended. Thank you for your hospitality, Gekisha-sama. Thanked Conan courteously. I am Conan and this is my partner. Ryu Yokeis. Ah yes, I have heard your name whispered among the courts and streets, Yoke-san. Said Gekisha. Naruto didn't respond to the man, he didn't show any inkling that he heard what Gekisha said. But I imagine that you want to know the details about your mission. Stated Gekisha as he puffed out some smoke from his Kaizuru. As you might or might not know, the land of Wind, more specifically, Sunagakure, has been falling into political and economical decline ever since Dato, the current Dato, has officially entered office. Dato is an religious lunatic and hedonist. Not only has he been denying Suna the access to funds and missions, he has also been bleeding the village dry of all its wealth. The shinobi of the village and the village itself will soon be bankrupt. Such a thing cannot happen and must not happen. Spoke Gekisha with a sneer, as Dato wasn't one of the people he approved of nor liked. I see. Spoke up Ryu, gaining Kanen's and Gekisha's attention. If Sunagakure were to fall into disarmament, the Land of Wind would have no protection from outside forces whatsoever. Your allies and friends Konoha and the Land of Fire cannot interfere, as it doesn't politically concern them, nor can they do anything about it, as it would be a violation of the peace and friendship treaty between Wind and Fire. And when the shinobi of Sunagakure lose their jobs and missions from lack of funding and economical grossing, they would eventually flock to Iwagakure, increasing the village's military might. And without protection and knowing Onoki, the Sandime Tsuchikage would use the opportunity to invade the Land of Wind, and expanding the Land of Earth's borders and influence with their new military. The remains of Sunny Cure would eventually become a second Iwagakure, a second hidden village for the same country, along with another military potential in the form of a third Biju, tailed beast. With their new power and weapons, Iwagakure would later, now, or in the future, invade the other nations, expanding even more of their influence. The other villages would fall under Iwa's new might, with only Kumo and their near-perfect Jinchuriki could rival them. As Kiri nor Konoha have any Biju under their thumbs, those villages would fall quickly. And if what I said were to happen, it would be the start of the Fourth Shinobi World War, and only Iwa will come out on top, and would invade again, as the other villages would be recuperating from their losses, and since Iwa would have 2 hidden villages and 3 Biju, the entire world shall become the Land of Earth. Affirmed Naruto. With Conan and Gekisha looking at him curiously, as Ryu never said so many words before. Could you please repeat that? Asked Gekisha, which made Naruto's blonde eyebrow tick in annoyance. Later, walking out of the capital were Naruto and Conan. You know you didn't have to repeat what you said word for word. Spoke Conan as she stared at Ryu. I wish I knew that earlier. Spoke Naruto. I still can't believe our mission. Said Conan with a hint of hesitance. Flashback. After repeating himself for Gekisha, Naruto was about to hear their mission's details. Yes, exactly that. Lied Gekisha, but he knew Ryu was right about one thing. If they lose Sunagakure, then the Land of Wind would follow. The only way to protect the Land of Wind is for a new Daio to take his place. If myself or my rival were to take up the seat, then the Land of Wind shall not suffer. Even if I do not become daimyo, my competitor, who also happens to be a friend of mine, will take responsibility for the Land of Wind. He shares many ideals with me and we have known each other for a long time. But in order for that to happen, Dato must be killed. Conan raised her eyebrows at that. Kill a Daio. Naruto didn't feel anything. In fact, when you look at it from his perspective, they were going to do the country a favor. Now Dato will be heading off on a journey to Sunagakure to inspect the village. It will take him a few days to arrive, so between that time he must die. If you are seen and placed in the bingo book, there is nothing I can do to pardon your crimes. However, you have permission to kill any shinobi or people in your way. Although I prefer if you kept death at a minimum. Spoke Gekisha. Naruto and Conan nodded at this and left the mansion. In order to kill a Daio. Flashback end. The wind harshly kicked up any sand around the area. The small particles blinded anyone who was caught in it. The dust left behind blotted the sun and obscured light. How anyone could navigate through the Land of Wind was a mystery to everyone. Walking through the storm was horrific, especially for the shinobi carrying the litter, that thing people carry on their shoulders for royalty and nobility, which contained the Daio, who was currently fanning himself comfortably in his seat, not caring about his subjects protecting him. The amateur shinobi did not detect the presence of 2 others, watching them from within the storm. I'll draw their attention, you kill the Daio. Ordered Naruto, to which Conan nodded and left. Naruto cancelled his wind jutsu that was kicking up the dust storm and walked gracefully forward towards the shinobi and the Daio. Kankuro. The storm, it's dispersing. Yelled Tamari from her point near the litter. I can see that. I had a feeling that this storm wasn't natural, muttered Kankuro as he surveyed the area. Everyone be on alert, commanded Kankuro. Whispers echoed among the shinobi. They placed the daimyo's litter onto the sand and prepared themselves for an attack. Finally the dust and sand dispersed fully and Tamari and Kanuro saw up ahead was a black boot with a black cloak with red clouds dotting it. The person wore a head with a mask that took the appearance of a menacing skull which was completely white on one side and had 10 red stripes on the left nearly covering the entire left side and had sharp teeth and a pointed chin. The person's arms were currently crossed in a lazy manner as if he didn't take the shinobi seriously. The Sunanin took out their kunais and readied battle stances. The 40 or so ninja looked nervous, and some looked confident thinking that they could battle the mysterious opponent. Who goes there? Yelled Kankuro. Naruto, believing that his was the perfect time to build up a reputation in Suna, idly revealed his name. Ryu Yokeis, whispered Naruto, which was loud enough to hear. Now all the shinobi were scared. They had of course known and heard about the exploits of the Yokeis no Ryu, Dragon of the Night Wind. And they weren't too excited to face him in battle. However, they were Suna shinobi. They would never fail a mission unless it was their last option. Move aside or you will leave us no choice but to use lethal force, shouted Tamari as she readied her giant folding fan. To be honest, she doubted they could take on such a well-known and famous shinobi by themselves. But they had him with them, so maybe, just maybe. Whatever, stated Naruto as he channeled chakra into his left eye, preparing one of his most powerful jutsu in his arsenal that Madara described it as the absolute offense. A jutsu so versatile and powerful that even Madara himself feared and respected it. Kamionaneo, Chikyu Tentano Ibiki, Kamionaneo, earth-reducing breath of heaven, whispered Naruto. And directly behind him, gray ash started rising up from the sand. Large clumps of it swirling around like waves and tides. Billions of ash particles filled the air and almost blanketed the sun. Ash, yelled and questioned Tamari. She didn't know what to make of it. Was it a new undiscovered Keki Genkai? Yes, it was ash, but in actuality each particle was in fact a tiny blade. Although one particle would do little to no damage other than a small cut, imagine what would happen if you were attacked by billions of needles and swords. Naruto could mentally control the ash, although if he moved his hand the ash's already considerable speed in combat would double in swiftness. Ash of who? Who died? Questioned one of the more inexperienced of the shinobi. Naruto made a mental command and had the ash fly towards the shinobi. Some stupid ones thought they could take him on and deciding to cut the particles with their kunais. Although it wasn't very smart because the ash blades were too small to pinpoint and the fact that there was a billion more didn't help. They were so immersed in cutting the ash that they didn't register what was truly happening to them. I wouldn't breathe it in if I was you, warned Ryu. The idiot shinobi looked at him questioningly until they started feeling pain from within their lungs, where they began coughing up blood, choking hoarsely and falling to their knees. Naruto, using his ash blades, attacked their bodies from the inside by cutting up their lungs with the ash. Tamari and Kanuro stared in shock at the display of power. They knew now if they breathed the ash in, death would follow shortly after. Everyone cover your mouth and noses, commanded Tamari, and the Suna shinobi did so without question with their face masks and turbans, even though they knew that the danger had yet to pass. Naruto took a more direct approach and had his ash attack the shinobi more directly. Some falling to the barbed blades of the ash, Tamari protected others by using her fan to create air pockets and wind currents. Though no matter how much wind she conjured, the ash was relentlessly kept attacking. Naruto, sensing that one of the shinobi coming in at him from his left, turned his head to see a burly shinobi coming at him ready to strike with his fist. But the ash wasn't just offensive, but also defensive. The shinobi went to attack Naruto, ready to hit him with his fist. But the ash made a small wall, or shield, protecting Naruto from the attack and also having the added benefit of slicing and dicing the shinobi's fist, who pulled away from the ash, only making the damage worse. The man held his profusely bleeding hand in his other arm, inspecting the damage. Naruto mentally commanded his ash to surround the shinobi's arm, encircling it like a snake. And fitly the coiling ash shredded the ninja's arm, leaving only a bloody stub, and the remains dropped to the ground, coating the sand with a new color. Not done playing with his prey, Naruto mentally commanded his ash to finish of the ninja, where it wrapped completely around the ninja's body and slivered the man's body, leaving only tiny fragments. And even more blood stained the sand underneath his feet. Naruto turned his gaze back onto the rest of the shinobi and saw two running at him with the kunais ready. Obviously they had not learned the lesson their comrade went through. Ryu had his ash fly towards the shinobi, ready for them to meet the same fate as their comrade. The ninja stopped abruptly in fear. They could literally there see death coming at them. However, the ground churned and rumbled around them, shaking the core of the earth. Korohei, Sanchao, Black Secret Technique, Salamander, yelled Kankuro as his puppet known as Salamander came up out of the ground and shielded the two shinobi from Ryu's ash attack. Salamander's tough armor can shield people from attacks such as those two will be safe as long as they stay in there, thought Kankuro as he cut off the connection between the chakra stings used to govern the puppet. Naruto called back most of his ash with the rest by his side. He knew he could saw his way through the puppet's defenses just by using more ash. However, he didn't have the time nor patience. Heitan, Fujin, ash release, Fujin spoke Naruto while he stretched out his open, gloved palm pointing to the sky as he coalesced and clumped some of the ash together to form 3 balls the size of his palm together, rotating between each other, like planets around a sun. The 3 balls were then condensed and pressurized, becoming smaller, about half the size of Naruto's palm. The Heitan Fujin is the manipulation of the Chikyu Tentano Ibiki. It allowed Naruto to form and condense the ash into weapons and other things, which also increased its sharpness where it could penetrate and pierce steel easily, and the added benefit of burning and cauterizing the victim it come in contact with just the simplest touch. It had the same basis as Inten Kagutsuchi, where it applied shape transformation to the ash. Naruto, holding the condensed ash balls over his palm, flexed his arm towards the puppet, where the small balls flew at unimaginable speeds, where they pierced the puppet's defenses easily, along with burning their way through the armor. The shinobi on the inside flinched at the 2 balls, but they stopped suddenly in front of their faces, just floating there. Naruto snapped his fingers where the balls on the inside of the puppet released all the built-up tension, where they became spikes jutting out of the puppet, covered in blood. The action destroyed the puppet salamander, causing it to become useless. The hooded, masked blonde recalled the ash back to him, along with the other billions of blades clumped together, making it appear like a cloud. Kankuro gritted his teeth at the man for destroying one of his puppets and killing his comrades. He took out 2 sealing scrolls containing the rest of his puppets, while Naruto condensed more ash and creating 5 small balls of ash. Kankuro, don't fight him by yourself. He hasn't even moved from his position when we first started this fight, warned Temari at her foolish younger brother. But no one was listening to her, as the shinobi among them also supported Kankuro. The ninja took out kunai with exploding tags connected to them and explosive balls with them. Kankuro took out his 2 other puppets, Crow and Black Ant, and used the chakra threads to control their movements. All Right surrounded him and used wind jutsu and exploding tags to keep the ash at bay, commanded Kankuro, and the Suna ninja roared in approval as they charged at Naruto, who kiaed his emotionless visage hidden behind his mask. He observed as the ninja evaded his attacks, and with the help of Kankuro's puppets they were advancing upon his position. With his Sharingan anticipating each person's movement, he could see that they were going to surround him and attack from all directions. He had to applaud them. They were defending against his ash rather nicely. However, he was deliberately holding back so to observe what they were up to and drawing out the last Suna shinobi who was hiding near the Daio. Surround him and fire off everyone. Explosive tag, you have, ordered Kankuro as he prepared his 2 puppets to capture Ryu. So every shinobi fired off their explosives at each Naruto, who used the Heitan Fujin to protect himself by forming a shield around him. Explosion after explosion did the ninja witness the intense array of munition against their opponent. After they were done, a large dust cloud blanketed everything, preventing them from seeing the result of the continuous assault. Temaru narrowed her eyes hoping to see something, so did Kankuro, but it was all for naught as the shield protecting Ryu didn't have a crack in it. The shinobi from the outside were sweating a little. The shield that surrounded their enemy was blocking their view. They instead saw the dome of ash take the shape of spears and revealing that there was no one on the inside of the ash barrier. And they were no longer able to think as the spears rocketed forward and bored their way through the ninjas' bodies, even continuing onwards after shooting their way straight through the shinobi cannon fodder. Their blood stained the ground and muddied the sand. Temari searched everywhere around her, but the situation was dire. There were only a few ninja left, around 7. They would be easy targets now. Seeing black and red in the corner of her eye, she saw one of her comrades searching around the area, and behind him was Ryuyoke's, with a kunai in hand. "Behind you!" shouted Temari at the ninja, who turned around to find a kunai ready to slit his throat. "You're pointing that at the wrong person," spoke a voice. Naruto turned his gaze to see someone he never thought to see so soon and yet wanted to capture and kill for his own goals. Gaara no Sabaku of the Sand Waterfall. standing atop the litter of the Dayo like a proud eagle ready to defend the skies. Naruto stared blankly at the Jinchuriki. Right now he was presented with the opportunity to further the Eye of the Moon plan by extracting the Ichibi from Gaara and sealing it within the Geto Mazo. Even though it wasn't his main objective and they would capture the Ichibi later when the hunt for the Biju began. Naruto didn't say anything but instead slit the nin's throat while throwing the kunai at Gaara where the sand shield appeared and protected him from the kunai. That sand is as fast as always. Scrutinized Naruto. Suddenly an ash cloud appeared behind Naruto, where he hid the ash under the sand earlier after he escaped the so-called assault from Kankuro and the now-dead shinobi. What was the old saying, the best defense is a good offense and the best defense is a good defense? Well, right now offense and defense were having a major stare down. Gaara's sand and Naruto's ash. I will give you this chance, leave now. Threatened Gaara as the cork on his gourd shook a little. But if I was to leave, wouldn't you miss me? Jested Naruto, which was enough for a reaction from the redhead, where a large volume of sand attacked him and the blonde responded with an equal volume of ash countering the attack. Naruto's prediction was correct. Since his ash was designed to be more aggressive, when it came to combat, Naruto's ash plowed through Gaara's sand easily, where the redhead was forced off the litter and onto his home ground. While within the royal carrier, Data was complaining from the noise outside as stuck-up noble usually were. What do they think they're doing screaming and shouting like that? It's really distracting. Spoke Dato as was reading a book. The door to his litter opened revealing a figure, but was obscured mostly because of the light from the sun beaming behind the person, giving them an angelic appearance. Ah yes, servant, bring me something to drink and entertain me. Ordered Dato. The figure stepped forward a little, just enough for some of the person's defining features could be seen. The person had a slender frame which obviously belonged to a woman, and blue hair, tied into a small bun with an origami flower in the bun and flower hair clips on her left bang. The woman brought her arm out in front of her where it folded into many sheets of paper, where they wrapped around Dato first, aiming for his mouth so he couldn't call out for help. With a few minutes Dato was lying dead in his own litter, death by asphyxiation. The woman herself folded into sheets of paper and flew off somewhere. Back with Naruto and Gaara's battle. Gaara was completely put on the defensive as his opponent kept flinging the dark gray ash at him. He's never had to move so much in a battle. While his opponent had yet to move form his position. This was not someone Gaara could defeat with simple sand. However, he had the environmental advantage as Ryuyoke's was standing on the substance Gaara was famous for. Using the sand underneath Rya's feet, Gaara attempted to snatch Ryu and crush with the sand. But the Akatsuki member jumped into the air and onto a small cloud of ash when the sand tried to reach up for his leg. Gaara chased after his enemy by also jumping onto a cloud of sand and using his powers to make it hover in the air. If using the desert sand was not enough for the ash, Gaara had to rely on his own sand in his gourd. Gaara made large strip of sand and compressed it, making it harder and denser. Renden, Tsunashigir, successive shots, sand drizzle. Yelled Gaara as he hurled large bullets of sand at Naruto, who countered with ash bullets the same size. Heitan Fujin. Shouted Naruto as he compressed his ash into a massive ball as tall as he was and hovered it above Gaara. Naruto wasn't fighting all out again because he wanted to measure his ability with the ash, so basically this was mainly a test drive as Zetsu's didn't make good test subjects. Gaara observed the large ball above. Was the enemy going to drop into on him? Instead, the ball began to branch out into many raining spikes coming down upon Gaara, where the branching spikes branched out even more as spikes shot out of the other spikes, forming a root-like system of deadly ash spikes. Gaara! Yelled Tamari, fearful over her brother's safety. As she had seen the splitting spikes and their sheer speed. However, Gaara had shielded himself using his characteristic shield of sand, which was hardened to protect him, but some of the ash spikes had pierced and penetrated into his shield, which barely withstood the barrage of the attack, and also, he wasn't fast enough to move out of the way. Naruto, seeing as his favorite ash tactic didn't work, decided to use his ash's secondary benefit. Naruto from upon his ash cloud flex his hand and had his ash revert back to its particle form and gather around the shield. Gaara didn't know what was happening and instead used some of his sand to create the Daisen no Mi, third eye, which allowed Gaara to view the outside world from within his dome of sand, and saw ash converging on him where it blanketed his entire sandball shield. Now that the ash was in place, Naruto used the Heitan Fujin again. Gaara, seeing everything from the outside, witnessed the ash beginning to glow brightly orange and appearing as sparks. The redhead wondered what was happening, but he began to feel the inside of his sand dome heat a little. And his sand was becoming glass. Naruto could also burn his targets with his ash reaching temperature of over 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, and it could go even higher than that. That where the name Fujin came into the jutsu, as in a way, it used the wind to sharpen the ash and fuel the temperature like a flame. Gaara in the sand dome was baffled at what was happening. His sand was turning into glass before his eyes and the temperature was quickly rising. 20 seconds passed and Gaara's sand was completely glass, almost resembling a diamond. And he could now clearly see Ryu from the other side, preparing another jutsu. Naruto recalled all his ash back to him, and compressed it into tiny balls the size of his fingernails. He gestured his arm and had the ash fly at Gaara's now glass shield at near frightening speed. Gaara couldn't do anything other than watch the ash balls, skewing his shield and cutting through his sand armor. The ball's speed and sharpness was so great it was able to cut through Gaara's sand armor. His glass dome shattered, and he plummeted to the ground like a rock because of the height. Gaara would most likely die from the fall if it wasn't for some sand from the desert rocketing forward and cushioning his fall. Gaara inspected the state he was in. He had multiple cuts and wounds over his body and his clothing was torn in several places. He was a little uneasy by the sight of his own blood because only 2 other people had been able to make him bleed: Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto Uzumaki. He cringed a little when he remembered his first and greatest friend. But now was not the time to be thinking about the past. Right now he had to defeat his enemy. Who was staring at him from above like a falcon, or a wolf on a large hill? This man was infuriating. Everything Gaara tried it seemed to have no effect. His ash was similar in concept to the Sandaime Kasuke's iron sand. Naruto could sense something large coming from across the dunes. Multiple chakra signatures converging on his position, but slowly they wouldn't be here for a while now. He could sense the Daio was dead, but he had the opportunity to capture the Ichibi no Tanyakai, one-tailed raccoon. He moved his arm and mentally commanded his ash to attack Gaara, who tried his hardest with the sand he had. Gaara had to do something with before he died at the man's hands and the Ichibi was released and the village would suffer the Baju's wrath. Gaara created a sand clone under the cover of the ash and replaced himself with it, avoiding any damage while also preparing his strongest defensive technique. Sometimes offense could only counter offense. Naruto mentally ordered his ash to stop attacking Jinchuriki. He still needed the vessel alive so to extract the Biju. Naruto didn't care about his former friends. Everything to him was the Eye of the Moon, the infinite Tsukuyomi. If killing his former friends ensured the Eye of the Moon, then he would sacrifice any and everything to achieve it. He could sense a large build-up of chakra to his left. He momentarily wondered what Gaara was up to. But judging from the chakra build-up, it had to be a powerful technique, so he created more ash from his chakra and had it stay by his side, preparing him for what was to come. He received his answer when he sensed chakra-infused sand above him. Where he looked up, TC sand being condensed into boulder-like balls, even larger than cannonballs. It didn't take genius to figure out the tactic Gaara was using, since it was similar to his own. He used the Heitan Fujin to create a hardened shield of ash above him, and he reinforced it by creating more ash particles from his chakra. Suna Arar, Sandhill, yelled Gaara as he dropped the boulder-like balls of sand on top of Naruto, who was being protected by the ash. But at some point, the ash would fail as a defense since it wasn't as hard or dense as sand or earth. In an effort to escape, Naruto jumped away from his platform of ash and landed on the soft sand gracefully. He looked back up to see the sand hail descending upon his position, narrowly dodging the hail as it impacted against the sandy ground, where it kicked up small explosions of sand, which landed in Naruto's eyes, blinding him. He couldn't see and the itchiness in his eyes were annoying as he rubbed his eyes while dodging the balls of sand. However, the blonde didn't need the Sharingan to know where the hail was coming, as he could sense it. Although he had to be weary to where the Ichibi Jinchuriki was. And the fact that he could fly and possibly hide his massive chakra from sensors complicated things. So Naruto molded hand seals to perform a jutsu specifically for the time where he was in this situation. Otonyo Myakudo Hibaikai, Sonic Pulsing Echo, spoke Naruto as he cast the jutsu where some of his chakra was distributed to his heart, ears and brain. Naruto learned this jutsu from the Bat Clan, another animal he had a summoning with. This jutsu released ultrasonic sounds from Naruto's heart, where the pulses created the sounds. When the pulse would hit something, it would rebound or echo back to Naruto's ears, where his brain would create a detailed image of Naruto's surroundings, from people, places, trees, even to the last speck of sand he was standing on. Even the cover of night, Naruto could see clearer in daylight. However, unfortunately, Naruto could not see chakra like the Sharingan, and the images created by his brain were black with white outlines. Right now Gaara was kneeling to his right, watching him almost as if waiting for a trap. And he was right in his belief as Gaara slammed his hands down on the ground where the sand moved to his command. Until Naruto regained his sight, he would have to be on the defensive, for now. Sabakutezo, Sand Waterfall Imperial Funeral, yelled Gaara as he surged copious amounts of sand that could easily change a landscape right at Naruto, who saw the image in his mind. If things got too out of hand, Naruto could always use that jutsu. However, now was not the time. Knowing that he couldn't escape the crushing sand, Naruto jumped over it to Gaara's position, but it seemed he wouldn't be getting away easily as a stream of sand jutted out of the sand wave, latching onto Naruto's leg, and sent him hurtling back into the sand stream. Although the blonde saw the mental image generated by his heart, ears and brain since he was in midair, he couldn't avoid it fully. Gaara kept sending shockwaves of crushing pressure into the sand, hoping to kill the man. When he removed the sand, all he saw was a terribly torn cloak with red clouds on it. But no blood or body. Gaara narrowed his eyes in suspicion. He didn't kill the man, no, instead he escaped, but his whereabouts were unknown for now. Although he did expect an attack coming from down below. When he was battling with Kimimaro Kaguya, one of Orochimaru's most loyal servants. Gaara had almost died at the servant's hands if he hadn't died of his disease at that time. Before his eyes, Gaara could see the ash particles floating softly through the air, along with the sand Gaara had been using. All the ash around the area flew at him with great speed, and Gaara's sand shield protected him, but not from the whip made of ash, gnashing at Gaara's sand shield. Naruto had escaped by replacing himself with a large rock not far away. It was crushed in his stead, and he finally regained his sight. And immediately using the Heitan Fujin to create a whip made of the sharpest ash particles, Naruto could also form another whip in his other hand, and he didn't need to have his hand suffer the effects of the ash. Also, he could also fling sharpened ash spikes from the whip as projectile weapons. Also, since the Chikyu Tentano Ibiki was extremely versatile, Naruto could also form other weapons depending on the situation, but his favorite was the whip. Naruto swept the whip horizontally at Gaara, who ducked under the attack, which without touching the ground created a large veil of sand that obscured everyone else's view. But Naruto continued on with the assault as he struck the ground vertically, aiming for Gaara, which kicked up more sand. Gaara tried to perform his catch and crush tactic again. But it failed as Ryu severed the sand with the ash whip easily and swiftly. Naruto cracked the whip, which hurled ash spikes at Gaara, whose sand shield barely protected him if it wasn't for him reinforcing it with his chakra. Gaara slammed his fist into the ground, which in turn created a fist made of sand, which diagonally punched Ryu in the gut, which almost made the blonde out of breath and shooting him in the air, where he landed on an ash cloud he created. Gaara yet again followed after him in attempt to not let him escape. Being Akatsuki, he might have information on their movements. But there was something very wrong with this picture, something missing. Naruto checked his chakra levels, they were running dangerously low. He cursed himself for toying with his prey for too long. He knew what happened when he ran out of chakra, but right now it couldn't be helped. Using the rest of his chakra, he converted his ash whip using the Heitan Fujin in a pillar of scathing ash larger than 10 men. He mentally hurled the ash at Gaara as his last stand, who retaliated with a pillar of sand with as much force and density where a deadlock was achieved. Naruto didn't have much chakra left, so the ash pillar was weaker than what it was supposed to be. Gaara had to finish this fight soon. He would have to use his greatest offensive attack to kill the man before him. He gritted his teeth in frustration as he prepared the jutsu. Naruto could sense a massive build-up of chakra coming from before him. He wondered what Gaara was preparing, as whatever he was about to send at him must have been powerful if such a technique required this large amount of chakra, which was many chunins compiled together. Seiko Zetai Kajiki Shukaku no Hoko, ultimately hard absolute attack, Spear of Shukaku, yelled Gaara as he gathered the hardest materials in his sand and compressed it into a halberd in the shape of Shukaku's hand. Gaara hurled the spear at Naruto, who was amazed at its speed, where it quickly pierced through easily the conflicting sand and ash pillars. It even continued forward through torso and continued onwards where it exited his body. Naruto coughed up blood and finally met defeat at the hands of the redhead Jinchuriki. He plummeted to the ground where sand was kicked up from his point of impact. And he was unable to capture the Jinchuriki, but given the circumstances it was understandable. The ash Naruto had summoned dispersed in the air and was swiftly where it was merely particles, losing its sharpness. Gaara, on his levitating cloud of sand, dropped down next to the downed Akatsuki member. He walked up to the man intent on finishing the job, as he had given him a fatal wound, and he wouldn't survive for much longer, but they could hopefully salvage the secrets of the Akatsuki from his body. "This is your end," spoke Gaara adamantly as he shaped his sand to cover Ryu's neck where his throat would be crushed. "Looks like I failed. I wonder if he'll be mad," spoke Ryu. Gaara raised his eyebrow at the man, confused to what he meant. Slowly Rhea's entire body started turning gray as his entire form began falling apart into dead, gray flower petals. Nothing of the man remained, but the dead flower petals coating the sand. Gaara was stunned. Was he fighting a clone the entire time? And if so, when did the enemy have time to create a clone? Gaara! Yelled Kankuro, who was standing with Tamari by the daimyo's litter. Stunned expressions on their faces. Gaara, after having an exhausting battle, forced himself to run to his siblings' positions. When he arrived at the royal carrier, he too was shocked at what he saw. Sitting in his own litter was the daimyo's body, slumped slightly. His face was pale, and his eyes were a little blurred. But how? Questioned Gaara as he stared at the Land of Wind's now dead ruler. Then it finally came to him: what was missing? The Akatsuki always work in groups of 2. Ryuyokeis had a partner, and that partner killed the Daio. Gaara gritted his teeth and clenched his fist at being outfoxed. He was one of the main candidates for Kazekage, and yet, he couldn't have figured out something so simple. Not only that, their mission failed. They would have to return to the village in failure, which was even worse as many of his comrades perished in battle. He first thought that the Akatsuki were after him because of his maybe future status as Kazekage. But at the moment, he would place Ryuyokeis in the bingo book for this crime against the Land of Wind. Somewhere in the Land of Rivers was Konan, who was sitting next to the prone body of Ryuyokeis, who was currently seated on the ground holding the tiger seal while his eyes were closed. He opened his eyes to find himself back in his original body. So the Divine Willow failed, it seems, stated Naruto out loud, alerting Konan, who looked at him curiously. Divine Willow? Questioned the Blueanet. One of my Mangekyo's powers. The Kamionaneo, Tenryanaji Seijun, Divine Willow's purity. By using both my eyes can I create perfect copies of myself, which are able to send information back to me. However, unlike the shadow clone, if you hit it, it won't disperse, rather it will continue to fight, it can even bleed. Also, I can grant them complete sentience, if I want to, allowing them to think and strategize themselves, adding on to the fact that I can restrict their power if I want to. Explained Naruto, and Konan was stunned that such a jutsu existed in the world. However, like the shadow clone, jutsu, it sends information back to the original, but I see all the memories happening at once like a screen on a television, but from different perspectives all at once. And it causes great stress on my brain where I have to regularly sort through the memories. It's also very draining on my chakra. If I have a dead body beforehand, then it will require less chakra to use, as I basically send my chakra into the body, replicating myself, because that person had chakra running through their body. How many copies can you create? Queried Konan. 7, only 4 if I don't have corpses to use. Any number beyond that will become too chakra taxing, and my mental fortitude can only handle 7 at a time. Answered Naruto. He originally, when he first discovered the ability, could only sue 2, and that was with corpses, not without. He trained himself in its uses until he became skilled enough with its uses that he deemed them preferable. The Tenryanaji Seijun was how Naruto was able to be in multiple places at the same time without the use of clones. The jutsu was the perfect clone jutsu, even surpassing that of Kage Bunshin no jutsu, although when it came to numerical distribution, it was nowhere near that of the Nadame Hokage's invention. I sense that you killed the Daio, so I took the liberty of sending a Divine Willow to Gekisha, informing him of the success of the mission. Said Naruto, to which Konan nodded. Through the Divine Willow's memories could Naruto see that Gekisha was pleased with such a thing and promised he would pay the Akatsuki lavishly. And he's quite pleased with the result. So what now? Questioned Konan. For now, let's travel until we are assigned a new mission. Said Naruto, getting up off the ground and walking through the forest with Konan joining him. They were walking for who knows how long. They suspected that they must have been in the Land of Fire by now. Zetsu had surprised them by showing up unannounced, telling them that Pain was pleased with the success of the mission, although the leader of Akatsuki was a little sour over the failed capture of the Ichibi. Even if tea wasn't their main objective, even Naruto was bitter over it. But it didn't matter, what was done was done. Walking along the path, the two hadn't spoken to each other, for there had been nothing to speak about. Naruto was pondering over the feeling he had earlier, and he felt it again when he was with Konan above the clouds. He had felt nothing since Madara's, and even before that, so why now? And what caused? Were the questions running through his mind? He regained himself when what appeared to be an entrance to a large hot spring came into view. He looked over to Konan to see her reaction, but her neutral, blank face was in full sway, it seemed. We should go to the hot springs, suggested Naruto, which caught Konan by surprise as she nearly jumped out of her skin because of the silence. Pardon, replied Conan. We should go to the hot springs. I imagine you want to relax after the tiresome day we had. Continued Naruto as he started walking to the hot spring, without giving a chance for Conan to reply. Besides, out of all the onsens in the entire world, which were thousands, would they run into someone that could probably cause an insurmountable amount of trouble? A few minutes later, both Akatsuki members booked themselves into the hot springs and were shown the way to the gender-specific. Naruto found the men's changing rooms where he stripped down and wrapped a towel around his waist, shielding his pride from the world. It felt like forever since he had last been to an onsen. He wondered if he could get some enjoyment from it. Conan meanwhile had also found the changing rooms for the women's onsen where she stripped down and wrapped a towel around her except covering her whole body. She undid the bun in her hair, allowing it to reign free from its restraints. She took out her origami flower and placed it gently upon her clothes. However, it was her last accessory that made her very careful and protective. Her birthday flower hair clips she had received from Ryu. Despite not having them for long, Conan could say that the hair clips were among her most valued items, since rarely in her life did she receive gifts. She placed the flower hair clips alongside her origami flower and left to soak in some hot water to calm her sore muscles. Naruto slowly eased himself into the warm water, and he instantly felt his muscles relax from the heat. He eased his head back slightly and breathed in deeply. And there it was, that feeling again. It felt contenting, although it was there for just a second. What was happening to him? Not bothering to waste brain power on it, Naruto just relaxed himself. Conan slipped into the water without as much care as Ryu. She was a little anxious, thinking that Ryu would try to peek on her in the onsen, since he groped her ass, which he has also seen, ran into a room naked, alluded to a certain performance of coitus, and yet acting as if he didn't do anything wrong. Conan looked around at all the females with her in the onsen. She had rarely interacted with anyone outside the male gender, so she was a little confused when it came to what women liked, since she slightly regarded herself as a tomboy, but she did know that flowers were something which women accepted universally. Not thinking any more about it, she relaxed herself in the steaming water and closed her eyes in relative peace. Naruto, on the other hand, was actually unwinding himself in the hot spring. It's as if nothing could bother him at this moment. However, his relaxation was interrupted when he heard an adverse sound, almost like giggling, coming from the barrier separating the two genders. He tried to brush it off as something his imagination conjured up. But then he heard it again, which made his eyebrow tick. Like before, he tried to ignore it. But the giggling was still there. He slightly turned his head to see a man peeking through a hole in the onsen barrier and snickering perversely. It didn't take a genius or an idiot to figure out what he was giggling at. Madara had instilled into him that women were beings to be respected and that they were stronger than men, for they were able to do and endure things men couldn't. The only person Madara ever feared in his life was his own mother, and even to today he still feared her. If anyone could bring Madara to heel, was his mother, his Achilles heel. In order to discipline the pervert and to help Conan feel at ease, who was on the other side, Naruto decided to use his very first jutsu, the first one he ever created. Reitan, commentary to Inazuma no Kiken no Chohimitsu. No Shin no Kyokudo no Atami wa ni Tokikuken to Akugajutsu no Shuryo Meidai ni Kyoku Suru. Lightning release, super secret true extreme pain of thunder and lightning experience to forever memorize for all eternity until the end of time, space and the universe technique, spoke Naruto as he gathered chakra into his right index finger and aimed it at the pervert behind him. He shot out a small ball made of lightning chakra, which traveled at pitiful speed. It was unbelievably slow that it took a whole minute to reach the pervert. When it finally struck him, the man spasmed about uncontrollably while yelping out in pain. He made comical movements as his arms and legs twisted about, and his eyeballs nearly bulged out of their sockets, and his tongue being tied into multiple knots. His eyes were wide and white in color as he felt himself being electrocuted. Finally, the lightning around his body stopped arcing about, and he slumped to the ground, smoldering as trickles of lightning winding around his body. Naruto relaxed himself, knowing that the pervert had been dealt with. He created that jutsu specifically to piss off and prank Madara back when he was training the blonde. And since Madara was an old man back then, he couldn't avoid it greatly. And it always was a shocker for the old man when he awoke from his naps by being shocked and ended up smoldering on the ground, where he would later hit the back of Naruto's head with his cane, calling it discipline. Naruto closed his eyes and listened to the sounds around him. "Hey Kanehamaru, I didn't know you could use Reitan," spoke the pervert as he got up off the ground. Naruto's eyes snapped open as he heard that name and familiar voice. He turned around to see the same pervert getting up off the ground. Now that the slight steam cleared up, Naruto could see long white hair and tan skin, with the man's face having two identical red lines running down his cheeks and beady black eyes. "I can't, I only have natures for fire, earth and wind," spoke a higher-pitched voice, where Naruto turned his head to see a small boy with a mop spiky brown hair which was currently wet. He felt the water to his left being disturbed a little to see the pervert a little away from Naruto's position. He recognized this man anywhere. How could he forget such a person? Sitting in the water grumbling was his former mentor and teacher, muttering about how his research peeping was always being interrupted. Naruto looked back into the water to see his reflection. Spiky sun-kissed blonde hair and a genjutsu over his eyes that was almost a shade of magnificent blue. How was he going to get out of this one? End of chapter 11.